It is time for the NFL Every Game on the Board podcast, where we're going to have Robbie Veno in, then Andrew McGinnis, and we'll hit on every single NFL game on Sunday and the Monday Nighter. But Robbie Veno, welcome into the podcast. How you doing today, bud?
Hey, I'm doing good, Drew. Another weekend loaded with football, World Series action on top of that, and NBA on top of that. So, like we say every week, busy. It's our time of year, right through the NCAA Final Four. Won't be much time for rest over the course of the next few months, but doing good and looking forward to a big weekend.
Yeah, congrats to you on that winner last night on the App State-Georgia Southern game. Anything real quick before we get into the NFL you can take from App State-Georgia Southern going forward?
Yeah, well, it looks as if, to me at least, they're the two best teams in the league. The Sun Belt is split into divisions this year. Yeah. Which makes it a conference championship game. So that end of it is interesting too with the result last night. But like I was saying to you, Drew, I mean, I played it under. It hung on for dear life. Won by a half a point. 48.5 is the number we used for clients, the number that we had for clients when we released it. And we'll see where App State goes from here with a backup quarterback or whether or not they can get healthy. It was a loss out of left field, to tell you the truth, at least a 20-point margin, just not expected. And like I say, Wesley Fields, that's a big addition when he comes back to the lineup for Georgia Southern.
Yeah, it was a tough one to see coming. We were talking about it off air, but nonetheless, you got a winner. Nice job there, Robbie. Let's head to the NFL slate. We got 251, 252, 9:30 a.m. That means 6:30 a.m. Pacific kick here. We got Philadelphia Eagles, Jacksonville Jaguars. We know what that time means. It's on the other side of the pond. Looks like the Eagles laying 343 the total, Robbie.
Yeah, and the big news here, of course, is that Jacksonville's secondary, which will now be minus 3 of 4 starters, certainly makes room for Carson Wentz and the Philadelphia passing game, which hasn't been especially sharp, Drew. They don't have the best fleet of wide receivers across the NFL, but when you mix in the tight ends, Ertz and Goddard, and Jordan Matthews hasn't been too bad as an acquisition during the season. But the disappearance of Nelson Aguilar, I know, gets a lot of talk here in town in Philadelphia. People wondering where Nelson Aguilar is after the year he had last year. That all aside, I think the bigger story is the 3 missing defensive backs for Jacksonville. If Jacksonville is unable to apply pressure to Carson Wentz, this could be a pretty good day for him and the passing game for the Eagles. We've seen the total go up now from 41 to 43. Believe that the secondary injuries have a lot to do with that. And what will Blake Bortles and company do against the Eagles pass rush here in London? He just has not been good. I don't know how else to say it. And the Philadelphia Eagles do have the capability with that defensive line rotation to put a lot of pressure on the QB. So Philly here looks like a good side to me, Drew. Jacksonville is used to going over to England and playing in these games. I don't know if that'll help or not. I usually think that personnel is the biggest help, never mind the trip. So I'd probably look toward the Eagles here and wouldn't be surprised if they put up a pretty decent-sized victory here.
Yeah, Robbie, I would think it definitely doesn't hurt them going over all the time, so for this particular matchup, I don't know how much it helps, but it definitely doesn't hurt them. What about this game is in Wembley, right?
Yeah.
So, handicapping this situation better than I do. What do you feel as far as the surface, the stadium, the weather, anything different than if this was in Jacksonville or Philadelphia to take towards either the side or the total play?
Yeah, the only difference here, and it hasn't come through this year in the previous games played in England the last couple of weeks, but generally speaking over the years, these football games in London, teams have tried, and I don't know if it's a intentional intent directed by the NFL or not, Drew, but it just seemed to me that in previous results that these teams would try to put on a little bit more of a show for the fans. Obviously, the NFL trying to reach into that worldwide net and grab even more fans. And, the talk of expansion to England's been going on forever. So from a totals perspective, I would play overs more often than not in these games. figuring that, they're looking to put on a bit of a display for the fans to make it appealing to them. Last two games here. Last week, I went the other way and had an under in the Chargers game, which came through as well. So it hasn't really worked out this year, but I still have that same general feeling. I always look at the total here, the two teams involved. Can I get to the over with the personnel on these two teams? The problem with this particular game, of course, is the Jacksonville side, which offensively has just been a dud all season long. Very hard to convince yourself that you're going to get a two-sided offensive affair when Jacksonville's involved.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Good breakdown there, Robbie. Hey, let's move to 253, 254, 1 o'clock Eastern kick. Cleveland, Pittsburgh. Looks like 49 the total, with the Steelers laying 8 or 8.5 at home.
Yeah, the Steelers situation here, it's gotten a little bit better, Drew, but I'm not so sure that they're equipped yet to be laying this type of number. Offensively, yes. Defensively, no. Baker Mayfield certainly not intimidated by any situation that he's been put in front of so far in the NFL this season. I think for Pittsburgh here, and let's just note real quick that weather should not be a factor here. The weather that's going to probably play a part in the Penn State game in a couple of Northeast Middle Atlantic stadiums on Saturday will be all gone by Sunday, so we're not really going to face any weather issues here. But I still worry about the Pittsburgh pass defense. Cleveland can run it a little bit. Pittsburgh's been a rock against the run, but Pittsburgh's given up 282 yards a game through the air. And for me, that type of defense always leaves back doors open here. If you have Pittsburgh up by 14 points late in the fourth, don't be surprised if Baker Mayfield, who has no give up in him, goes down the field and sticks a touchdown. They only lose by 7. So, for those reasons, I couldn't play the Steelers here, but I think I might be able to get involved somewhat in the total. Total play here is 48.5, 49. Still looking at possibly playing the over. Opener started at 50.5. Perhaps bettors thought it was a hair too high and dragged it down. But once again, it wasn't dragged down by weather concerns, and I think that both of these sides might get things going through the air here. So for me, if I can catch this 48.5 maybe coming down one more hair, I'll probably be involved in the over.
Guys, Rob Veno obviously knows his NFL, knows his college football as well. He's 36-22 with his top plays. That's 4 and 5% plays on Sportsmemo.com, hitting a 62% clip so far this year. So good guy to be on, and we have a coupon code special for the podcast at VENOHALF. That's VENOHALF. No spaces when you're typing it in, capital letters, and that will give you half off of any of his all-access packages. So you can get a 3-day package, 7-day package, 30-day, 90-day, whatever you want. It's all half off at sportsmemo.com. We got Denver at Kansas City here, Robbie. High-flying Kansas City, laying 10 at home, 53 the total.
Yeah, and they've met once before. It's interesting to see the two-game series end so early in the year. First time around, Denver had this team on the ropes. It was really, for me, it was the final test for Patrick Mahomes to pass. They had to come from behind in the fourth quarter. Von Miller and company had applied all sorts of pressure on that night. Denver's defense was playing well. In the end, Mahomes and the Chiefs did come out on top 27-23, even covered the number 3.5 in that game. Stayed under the total. But for KC, 446 total yards in that game. I think interesting on the Denver side was the fact that it was one of their better offensive efforts as well. 7 yards per play in that game for the Denver Broncos. Here in Kansas City, I wouldn't, if Denver couldn't contain them to less than 27, playing the way they did at home in that game, I don't think that film study or firsthand knowledge after playing him one time, I don't think second time around is going to make any difference for Denver on the defensive side. Seems to me that Mahomes and company will continue to roll and score points. Question here is, can Denver offensively keep up to get in under this number? Lots of news lately, Drew, with this NFL trade deadline coming up that Demaryius Thomas may be gone. I heard early this morning, or read early this morning, that perhaps Houston now would have interest in Demaryius Thomas after the Will Fuller injury last night. I know they're all professionals and they just go out and play. But I just wonder how that affects a guy who's a starting wide receiver, a supposed number one on a team that he might be dealt. Denver's got some weaponry. I don't know what the Chad Kelly situation does for this team. Obviously, an off-field incident that happened earlier in the week. So, situationally, exterior stuff, maybe that favors KC too. But I know one thing. They'll score their share of points. And if you're looking at a total play of 53.5 right here, just be a little bit weary of not major, but semi-improvement in that Kansas City defense last couple of weeks. They still give it up, but they've been a hair bit better.
Robbie, we got 257, 258 New York Jets at the Chicago. Yep, the Chicago Bears. Just making sure here. We got -7.5, -8. Chicago laying at home. 43.5 the total.
This is a crazy scheduling deal for the Bears, Drew. 3 consecutive AFC East opponents in a row, and the Bears haven't handled either of the first two whatsoever. Remember, 2 weeks ago it was Brock Osweiler's first start in place of Ryan Tannehill. They win that game. They score a lot of points. They gain a lot of yards in a contest where, throughout the week, money surged toward the Bears on the knowledge that Brock Osweiler was going to start, but it just didn't work out that way for Chicago in that contest. Come back last week, Tom Brady doesn't have Rob Gronkowski. We had that game as part of our podcast and kind of thought that the way New England operates their passing game, that it could slow down the Chicago pass rush and give the Chicago Bears strength on defense a bit of trouble. And it did. 38 points put up by the New England Patriots in that game. So far, 2 weeks, 2 AFC East opponents, and 69 points allowed by that Bears defense, which, heading into that game 2 weeks ago, Drew, all the talk and all the rage was about how great the Chicago defense was and how Khalil Mack had really improved things there. Against the Jets here, will it work out? I'm not sure. Sam Darnold has put a spark into the Jet offense for sure. He's mobile. He's got that escapability that can be troublesome for pass rushes. They found a ground game. I'd be more inclined to think that the way the Jets are going, that this game could potentially score points here. 45 the number. The Jets defensively kind of come at you with, since they don't have enough in their defensive line to just flat out pressure you from that standpoint, they come from the Todd Bowles philosophy, which he learned under Rex Ryan, to run a lot of blitzes from all angles and try and keep them confused. Let's see if it confuses Mitchell Trubisky here. He has not been consistent, has not been steady, but if they can pick up the blitzes, Chicago's got a real good opportunity to score some points here, Drew. So sidewise, a lot of money on the Bears. Not sure I like that side, but I may take a look at the total.
Robbie, we got Washington Redskins at the New York Giants. Looks like the Redskins -1. There is some pick'ems out there. 43.5 the total.
Just an impossible, deal for me to be able to play the Giants at this point in time, Drew. Now, they did cover the number Monday night, last play of the game. Eli, after those 2 quarterback sneaks that ran the clock down to 5 seconds, he throws a touchdown pass in the end zone to get the 23-18. They get a 2-point conversion, winds up 23-20, and they get a cover against Atlanta. Not a deserved cover, but one that came in the back door. They're all the same. Gained 433 yards overall against what's a miserable defense in the Atlanta Falcons. But, those 433, Drew, they weren't gained consistently throughout the game. I mean, the last drive had a lot to do with that. A couple of other scoring drives had a lot to do with that. And then there were multiple drives where the Giants just went nowhere against a bad Atlanta defense. I find that troubling, of course, against a Washington Redskin defense that's far superior to Atlanta. This is a divisional contest. There's too much friction going on with the Giants right now, for me, at least, to be on their side. And I think Washington very quietly, although not a great football team, but very quietly, they're going about their business in the NFC East. And this is another important game for them inside the division. They're already 1-0. The Giants sit at 0-2. It'd be a desperate situation for the Giants here. Redskins could increase their conference record to 5-1 with a win here. I think they will. I think Alex Smith and company have enough in the offensive tank to get enough points to cover this game. It's basically no point spread whatsoever. Redskins laying 1 here in this contest. So for me, it would be Washington. I just can't get behind the Giants right now. As good as Saquon Barkley is, the offensive line's a mess. Eli still hangs onto the ball too long, and they're probably likely to commit a turnover or two that makes a big difference in this game.
Yeah, and Robbie, what's up with Eli Manning? I mean, obviously he's getting up there in age. Is he going to try to hang on for multiple years, in your opinion? And I mean, is this just kind of like a fade-away scenario? I heard, as you said, you're not looking to bet on the Giants. Is it strictly because of Eli Manning?
I think it's the offense overall, because I couldn't put the entire blame on him. The offensive line's been no good for 2 years now, Drew. And, it's a quarterback who needs protection. Let's face it. He's got to be able to get back in the pocket for those extra couple of ticks. He doesn't need all day, but he can't have an onslaught of pass rushers immediately as soon as the ball gets snapped. The way that it is with the Giants right now, he just doesn't have that intangible of mobility to get out of the way. And if he hangs on to it right now for that extra tick, even with good protection by Giants standards, he gets sacked. So it's a combination effort here. The line isn't good enough to open up consistent holes for Saquon Barkley, so Eli can't even rely on getting a rush game established to back defenses off. Football's a very hard sport to pin on one guy. It's such a collective effort on both sides of the football. And I think with Eli, you never know what he could do behind an offensive line that might be able to protect him for a full 3.5 seconds.
Robbie, we got Seattle at Detroit, 49 the total, with the Lions laying 2.5 or 3, pretty much half and half throughout the sports books right now at sportsmemo.com odds page. So good one to shop around. But yeah, looks like Detroit laying 3 or 2.5 at home.
Yeah, they're a pleasant surprise this year, Drew, the Detroit Lions, and I think they're coming up under the radar. Certainly not a lot of people talking about the Detroit Lions, but offensively they're as consistent as it gets. If we go back and just erase that, erasable Monday night game to open the season against the Jets, where it looked at that time that Matt Patricia might be in over his head as a head coach. They get beat 48-17, score 17 points in that game. Since then, 27, 26, 24, 31, 32. Matt Stafford and company can score. The receiving core is great. The addition of Kerryon Johnson, the Auburn rookie, has been huge for this team. LeGarrette Blount as well, because they do run the football a little bit now. Like Detroit in all facets of offense. Defensively, still lacks some pass rush, and that could be troublesome against Seattle. Russell Wilson and company are at a point in their season and in the status of their team where they actually have to outscore people to beat them. The defensive side of the ball has been just racked with injuries and player defections. Right now they're an injured bunch, and they can be scored upon. So Russell Wilson and company have to score in order to win games. I look at this total of 49 and really think I might get there with this one over the total. Doug Baldwin, Tyler Lockett, the running game of Seattle, and of course Wilson's propensity for big plays against a team that doesn't provide a lot of pass rush, to me is interesting as far as points scored are concerned. The other side of that coin, if you're going to look to just play the game, side Detroit or Seattle, is Detroit at home has been pretty good, right? They've already knocked off Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers at home. Beat New England 26-10 on a Sunday night. Beat Green Bay 31-23, albeit with the help of 5 missed kicks by Mason Crosby. So I don't know how much we're going to put into how much stock we're going to put into that win, because the 5 kicks certainly could have changed the final score of that game around. I think what you note there, though, is the 31-23 final. 54 points. I really equate this game to that of the Detroit-Green Bay game a couple of weeks ago. I think there's so many similarities. Green Bay not very good in the secondary, running a bunch of young kids out there, not necessarily a good pass rush team. Seattle, a lot of those qualities. And on the offensive side, a quarterback who can make big plays with good receivers out there. I think Green Bay actually scored 23 in that game certainly without Randall Cobb. I think maybe Devontae Adams played that game, but they were probably without 2 of their starting wide receivers. So for me, my strongest look in that game would be Seattle-Detroit up and over the total.
All right, good stuff, Robbie. We got one game left here, and guys, remember the coupon code Veno, half for half off of any all-access pass with Robbie Veno, hitting 62% on his top plays, and he's got one up for tomorrow, Saturday. He's also got a couple plays for the Friday night card on college football. He'll also have NFL up there as well. Last game for this segment before we bring on McGinnis, we got 263-264 Tampa Bay at Cincinnati. Looks like we got 54.5 the total. Minus 3.5 for Cincinnati, laying it at home, Robbie.
For Tampa Bay, Drew, statistically last week, it's an absolute crush job that they put on. 34 first downs to 17, 456 yards to 305. They run 26 more offensive plays, yet they only escape with a 26-23 overtime victory against the Cleveland Browns in that one. So as good as they were, or as better as they were on both sides of the football than the Cleveland Browns were, they still couldn't really, get out of there in regulation with a cover, only laying 4 points. So take that into account and now put them in Cincinnati after Cincinnati gets their doors blown in by Kansas City 45-10. Listen, Cincinnati was never as good as their record indicated because the defense is so bad, but they're certainly not as bad as a 45-10 loss to the Chiefs would tell you. They're somewhere in between that, and that's probably good enough to go ahead and beat Tampa Bay. This, to me, is a very cheap number, 3.5. A little bit surprised here that the lack of respect for the Cincinnati Bengals in this game. Tampa Bay, for what it's worth, hasn't gotten a heck of a lot better with the insertion of Jameis Winston into the offense as far as overall result is concerned. The defense is still bad. The defense will be attacked in more ways than it was last week against Cleveland. So I think when I look at that one, Drew, the number just surprises me being that shy, only 3.5. Power ratings made the game 5.5, which goes across that key number of 4. I think if you can catch this 3.5 right now, today, I would go ahead and play Cincinnati minus the 3.5.
All right, good stuff, Robbie. Anything you want to throw out there before we shut this segment down?
You know what? We want to always wish the listeners good luck this weekend, and also, a couple of big games out there in college football to keep your eye on. Certainly, I'll say this, Drew. From my perspective, the non-Power 5 conferences this week will have a lot of my attention as this season dwindles down and we look for which of these teams are going to win their conferences or get involved in their conference title games. The MAC games last night, to me, were more interesting than any game. Of course, the Georgia Tech one, pretty good too. But keep an eye on everything out there. For me, like I say, handicapping this last third of the season is a little bit different. So hopefully we're giving you all out there good advice, and hopefully we can cash some tickets for you this weekend.
Well said, Robbie. And also remember to check the weather. Some weather issues out there in the Northeast, Mid-Atlantic area. So if you're betting totals or even sides, it matters a lot. So make sure to check that out. And guys, we'll be right back with McGinnis on the NFL Every Game on the Board podcast.